Hello class, in this tutorial I'd like to show you some basic CSS style and formatting for your page. And I'll do this tutorial a little bit differently. What I'll do is highlight the examples on the W3 School site and then try those out in the site that I just built in the previous tutorial, this one that has the 5 different pages. So I'm back on w3schools.com and I'm in the HTML tutorial and I'm down here on the HTML styles link page. Now, this can be a little confusing at first getting into CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and there is a separate tutorial for that. Now, the way that I like to teach this class is I will introduce some basic CSS for styling your page, mainly just colors and maybe a little bit of layout. I'll introduce that in the first maybe 5 or 6 weeks of class, and then I would like to switch over and work through this CSS tutorial, and this is primarily going to be for layout. So when you talk about CSS, that's typically what you're going to be using it for. Now obviously it's going to be styles, changing the color, font, look of your page, but where it's really good is with the layout and the responsive design, the designs that fit in any size screen, whether it's a phone or an iMac. So that's kind of where we're going to go. We will eventually end up at the CSS tutorial in a few more weeks. So if you are working ahead, you want to work ahead, that's one direction you could go. So as you work through this HTML tutorial, if you look at the assignments for the week, I assign most of these links here over the next 3 weeks, and you can work through these at your own pace. You're going to get to HTML colors and styles, and you'll see some CSS in here. So that's what I want to talk about in this tutorial. Let's start with the first one that you see right here. Using the style tag and inserting that into HTML is probably the simplest way that you can begin to incorporate some CSS into your page. And all I really want you to do to experiment with this is change around your colors and maybe fonts and things like that. So if you go to HTML styles, what I'll do here is I'll take some of this code and I'll put it in my website and see how it works. So it gives you some examples. Let me scroll down. So it talks about the style attribute, and again it is a CSS property. And the way it's written is that it goes directly into an HTML tag. It's pretty simple, and I'll show you what it looks like here, but the tag name, that could be like paragraph or body, style, and then equals, and in quotes, the property and the value. So the property would be what you want to change, for example, the background color. The value would be what color do you want it to be. And I think that's the first thing they do here, so let's experiment with this. So this is a style tag, so in the body tag, if you compare it right here to my code over here, you can see there's nothing in the body tag on mine. So I'll just copy and paste this. Okay, I'm going to copy this right here. And I'm going to come over here, make sure that my index.html file is opened up because I want to experiment with this on my home page. So I'll do one space in the body tag and I'll just paste this directly in. I'll do a file save, come over here and refresh this. And there's the powder blue. Now I'll talk about colors in the next tutorial, so you want to watch that one. I use a site called htmlcolorcodes.com, and I'm going to grab a different color here, something that might work a little better for my site. Give me some kind of a light gray. I'm going to use the hexadecimal value. I'm going to copy this. Again, watch that tutorial because it talks about these colors. And instead of the powder blue semicolon, I'm going to type in hashtag, and then I'm going to paste the hexadecimal. Okay, I already have the hashtag in there. File save, and come on over here and refresh again, and that gives me that kind of lighter gray color. So it's better to choose colors that way, but again, see that tutorial. So that's putting in a background color and a style there using the W3 Schools code. And then let's look at this within a heading or a paragraph tag. So let's see, here's HTML style. So if you put it into an H1 tag, let's just do this exactly like they have. I'll copy this. I've got an H1 right here. So again, I'll add this directly in. So the style tag goes in your HTML code. Again, click File Save. Make sure you're on your page right here. And now I've got the H1 tag in blue. So that's one easy way to change your fonts. Now that controls different individual sections of your page. One strength of CSS is that you can create a style sheet that affects every single page in your site at the same time. So if you make a change in that style sheet, it changes throughout your website. That'll be a future tutorial, but that's one of the strengths. So don't feel like you're always going to have to go individually, one at a time and change everything. That's just how you want to get started, going individually like this. But eventually, when we get into creating the separate style sheet, then it'll be a little more efficient. You can change your font right here. So again, you can read about this, and let's see, Courier looks quite a bit different. So let's say if we want to change, we want to add in the style Courier for my paragraphs. So I'll just do that here again to experiment with it, and I'm going to do this in a paragraph. So I've got this in, maybe I'll go to a different page here, and I want to put in a paragraph here. So if I'm going to type this in, it's going to be just like that, style, and then I'm going to say information about this page would go here. Not sure why I'm writing that in caps. Going to click File, Save. Now over here, and I was on my trumpet page, so I'll click there. So notice how obviously the font is different. When you're starting out, I would just stick with the simple fonts like Arial and Times and Courier and whatever else you want. With the basics though, so stick with those. And then there's also text size, so you could experiment with that as well. So and alignment here, centering. So that's where you want to start with HTML styles. Now a couple others here. Here's the HTML colors, which you'll find out more about that in the next tutorial. And then there's HTML and CSS. This is the other one. So if I'm recommending 3 of them here for this tutorial for you to practice on, I would start with styles, then I would look at colors, and then I would look at CSS. And then as you start looking through the rest of these, you will see some basic CSS inside of those to manipulate the look of what you're doing here with your pages. Now this is a pretty good one to read through because it talks about the different types of style. So you've got the inline, internal, and then external. And this is where we will eventually be heading with the external, where we will create a .css style, and then we will link to that from the individual HTML pages. So in examining these 3 style types a little bit more, just so you're kind of clear on what you're doing, when you're beginning and when you're looking at the basics, you're just going to start by putting some CSS inline, which is basically inside of specific HTML tags and elements. So like the H1 tag, you drop a style tag in there to change it. And that's the way most people are going to start when you're controlling your pages. Your next step would be to create an actual style tag in the head of your HTML that affects the different elements in your page. And it gives you an example of that. Now this is something that you really don't need to fool with this week. Maybe we'll get into this in the next week or two. But if you want to, you would be creating this, and you would put that in the head of your document, and then every H1 tag throughout that particular page would now be blue. So you can see how that would save you time. If you want all your H1 or you want all your paragraph tags to be red or blue, you only have to put that in one time, as opposed to the inline style that we just did, where you're typing in style equals color for every single paragraph tag. So that's your internal CSS. And then the next step, which is what you're eventually going to be doing, is you're going to be linking to a separate styles.css file. And then if you figure that you put this link in every single one of your HTML pages, you have your styles in that style sheet, then all you have to do is make one change on that style sheet and it changes every single page on your website, and that's how it becomes really efficient for you. So that's kind of where we're going here. But again, for this tutorial and this week, I would just like you to practice working on the inline styles using the style tag. So if you look back at this website here that I've been working on, and let me go back home. So I've changed the background color, and I've changed the H1 color, and now I have 5 working links. I've got some text, I've got images on here. This site would meet the requirements for that next project that has been posted, where you're creating your 5-page website. So this is pretty much what you would be doing. So let me know if you do have any questions on that, on getting started on some of the basic CSS. Keep in mind that CSS is really complicated as you get into layout. So you're going to see like an HTML layout, and a CSS on here. This uses CSS, and this can be pretty complicated, and this is where we're going to get to in the next few weeks, starting on looking at layout and responsive design. So this is the kind of thing that you can create here. So it does use a CSS framework, and that's where you can really start taking advantage of what CSS can do when you get into the layout. Alright, well that's it for this tutorial.